Two sisters live in a Toronto building and were shocked to be told their rent is going up $7,000 a month.
This video shows the aftermath of a basement fire deliberately set by tenants who had stopped paying rent.
It's a cross-country crisis with no easy repair. Renters worried about how to keep a roof over their heads.
The rental market in Canada is extremely bizarre. A basement suite is often not people's first choice when it comes to renting. Yet, earlier this year, a total of 25 international students were found to be living illegally in a single basement apartment in the city of Brampton. Even if we assume that this basement apartment is a good 1,000 square feet in size, that only leaves about 40 square feet for each person living in the apartment. That too, without considering space required for basic furniture. Needless to say, these are dangerous living conditions, which people would generally not expect to see in a developed country like Canada. There is high competition for rental units across the country, which is even leading to bidding wars, pushing the rents higher and higher. But that's not all. Things get even more strange in the Canadian rental market. There are reportedly landlords who are living in their basements and cars because their tenants would neither pay them their rent nor leave. There are multiple reports of landlords being owed thousands of dollars and many months of rent by their tenants. So, what explains this bizarre rental situation in Canada, where both the tenants and landlords seem to be suffering? You see, Canada is the second largest country in the world. It extends from the Pacific Ocean in the west to the Atlantic Ocean in the east, and the Arctic Ocean in the north. But the population of Canada is only about 41 million. In comparison, the United States, which is comparable in size to Canada, has a population of about 340 million, which is more than 8 times that of Canada. Due to the relatively smaller population, geographical conditions that make a good portion of the country unsuitable for farming, and due to the cold weather conditions, it is estimated that nearly 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the United States border. So naturally, there are much fewer densely populated cities in Canada when compared to the US that can provide business and job opportunities to people looking to move here. Canada has also historically relied on immigrants not only to support population growth due to a low birth rate in the country, but also economic factors, such as to address labor shortages. An example of this from the history books would be the nearly 17,000 Chinese workers brought to Canada in the late 19th century to build the Canadian Pacific Railway through the Rocky Mountains of Alberta and British Columbia. Throughout the years, along with majority of the immigrants, people from rural parts of the country have moved in to settle in cities such as Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, which have during the 20th century continued to grow to become huge metropolises with millions of people living in them. With growing population, naturally came growing demand for housing. In the recent decades, factors such as historically low interest rates after the 2008 financial crisis, and even demand from foreign buyers and investors for Canadian real estate, especially in cities such as Vancouver, have pushed home prices to levels never seen before. To put things in perspective, the benchmark price for detached homes in Vancouver had already reached nearly $1.4 million in December 2019. Then the pandemic hit, resulting in the Bank of Canada reducing the key policy interest rate to an all-time low of 0.25%. This resulted in a sudden surge in demand for housing as people tried to make the most of the low interest rate environment, pushing housing prices to astronomical levels. Then came the recent spike in immigration levels and subsequent population growth, with Canada adding over 1 million inhabitants per year, both in 2022 and 2023. In 2023, an estimated 97.6% of Canada's population growth came from international migration, and the remaining came from a natural increase. With a rapidly increasing population comes a rapidly increasing demand for housing. But sky-high housing prices across the country have made home ownership out of reach for many people. Average home prices are much higher than what a median income earning family can afford. And as a result, renting has remained the only option for many people in Canada, resulting in surging demand for rental units. People are struggling to find decent rental units due to high competition, low vacancy rates, and high rents. According to the CMHC, the vacancy rate in Canada in 2023 was a record low of 1.5%. As a result, bidding wars for rentals have become common in the past few years, pushing rents even higher. Average rent across the country reportedly reached a record $2,200 in May of this year, which is more than 30% higher than the lows of the pandemic. In a city like Vancouver, rents are much higher than this, with just a single-bedroom rental unit costing an average of over $2,700, according to recent data. But the rental market frenzy is not just limited to bigger cities like Vancouver and Toronto anymore. In attempts to find affordable housing and to reduce cost of living, many have migrated to relatively smaller cities such as Calgary and Edmonton, resulting in increasing housing and rental prices in these cities. This unfortunate state of Canada's rental market is leading to situations like these, where 25 people decided to live in a single basement apartment. Desperate tenants are sometimes being taken advantage of for profit, and are being lured into dangerous living conditions in the current rental market. While tenants have no doubt been struggling, things haven't always been pleasant for landlords either. On one hand, while increased interest rates have impacted many landlords by increasing their mortgage costs and thus forcing them to subsequently increase rents on their tenants, there are also many reported cases where landlords are struggling to make ends meet due to their tenants not paying rent for months. One of the reasons for this being the long timelines to resolve such disputes at the landlord and tenant boards, which could take months, leaving scope for some bad tenants to abuse the system. This has resulted in landlords being increasingly wary about who they rent their home to, and trying to validate as much information as possible before renting a place to someone, such as their employment status and their credit score. Increased scrutiny means prospective tenants who are new immigrants to Canada find it extremely challenging to get a place to rent, as they may not be having a credit and job history in the country when they first move here. This is in some cases leading to people offering multiple months of rent upfront in order to secure housing.
If you had to pay 12 months of rent up front to get a place, what would you say? I spoke with 8 newcomers who told me they paid up to 12 months of rent to land a place in the city.